Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is up, everyone? I am Charlie Shrem, and you're listening and watching another epic episode of Untold Stories, where twice a week together for the past 3 years, we've been, through the bull markets and the bear markets, through all the craziness, we've been able to figure out what's been going on before the rest of the world figures out what's been going on, just by having conversations with some of the most brilliant people, the brightest crowns in the box, to understand how this movement truly came to be, where are we right now, where are we going for the future, and everything in between, and a lot of fun and all the cool stories. And you guys know I just came back. It's good to be back home in Florida. I was over in Cannes at the film festival, and then meeting all like the Web3 and film projects out there, and potentially launching my own. And then I was out in Monaco at Coin Agenda, and I've never been more bullish on our industry. I'm really excited. I never go to conferences. I haven't specifically gone to events and meeting people in a long time. But I feel so reinvigorated. Going to be heading over to Consensus in Austin in a few weeks, or 2 weeks, I think. It has a really great feel to it. Everyone I know is going to be there. You have Bitcoiners and crypto folks, but it seems like more of like an adult related type festival. So it's going to be like everyone working together. So I'll be speaking. Oh man, I'll be speaking on Saturday. I think it's June 11th with my super good friend Jared Kenna, who actually got one of the people that got me into Bitcoin like over 11 years ago. He had the first Bitcoin exchange called TradeHill. And then Adam B. Levine is going to be moderating, who had the first Bitcoin podcast ever called Let's Talk Bitcoin. Him and Vitalik worked together at Bitcoin Magazine before Vitalik went to tell a lot of stories, went on to found Ethereum. We'll be telling a lot of stories. If you can't make it, I'll be recording it and we'll release it as a show. But I'm excited to talk to my guest today. You don't know him, but you know the company, and you realize, you guys know them because they're pretty much one of the top backend infrastructure that's been powering DeFi, GameFi, TradFi, all the Fi that, you could think of. Michael Shaulov, thank you so much, the CEO of Fireblocks. Thank you so much for coming on Untold Stories today.
Thanks, Charlie, for having me.
Like, there's so much. You guys have helped secured over $2.5 trillion in digital assets. Your clients are everyone from wallet infrastructure, financial institutions, neobanks, DeFi startups, and you've basically figured out a way, in a compliant way, to like de-risk custody, but at the same time not lose out on like the speed and efficiency that blockchains provide for us. Is that like accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is usually how we position ourselves. The guys that manage to bring, security and security, convenience, and speed together, right? And usually those are actually contradicting terms or ideas. And I think what Fireblocks is sort of this kind of unique solution, unique platform that is able to bring the convenience, the speed, the security into a single platform, and it'll help people to do it in a scalable and compliant way.
Let me take a step back here. What I've noticed happens a lot, and it's my fault too, is that we get overexcited and we start over-promising and under-delivering. The world expects us to have this Web3. The world expects us to be ready for all the technologies, to recreate the Federal Reserve, to do all these different things. Are we ready for that?
I think that from a technical standpoint, there are certain gaps, right, to unleash it to its sort of full capacity, right? But I don't think that we are at the point where we can't work towards that, right? I think that what are some of the biggest issues we have right now is probably just the scalability, right, of the blockchains and the stability of them in certain cases. And, while of course we still have a way to go with, some of the EVM-based blockchains, whether it's Ethereum or, the layer twos like Arbitrum and Polygon, and Avalanche, right? We still have, they're not in maximum capacity, right? So I think that there is no reason not to do a lot of those things right now. Build on those platforms a lot of the financial applications that need to be built. And as we basically building it, the layer one protocols will be able to improve the TPS and the stability, right? This is an active area of development. I think that every technology sort of some being created on day one, able to handle, trillion transactions per day, right? There is sort of this kind of gradual maturity that takes several years, but that doesn't mean that you can sort of start the adoption of that technology with what's like the reasonable leap of faith that those problems are going to be solved.
If you talk to like some of the early internet entrepreneurs like yourself, we had the founder of CNET, we've had David Chaum, we've had people that are referenced in like Satoshi's white paper, and if you talk to them, they will all admit that the internet as we know it today and what we're even using for this encrypted communication and file storage and who's incentivized by this, even this video stream and audio stream that we're creating, and who gets who's producing it, and how it's all the provenance behind it, and all the people that can profit from this potential show, even like all this was created on the internet that was like put together with scotch tape and band-aids, as they would say. It's like wasn't meant for that, because the demand was so great that the Web 2 world was always kind of playing catch up. Then you have companies like yourself that are allowing us to build on the offense. Do you think am I wrong? Like, are we building out now with the right tools and the right infrastructure to really be able to preserve all these type of freedom of speech and not just create something else that's the same as the old?
So I think it requires some level. Do we have the tools? The answer for that is yes. I think that the main question is how do you avoid taking shortcuts that eventually default into the way that the old system is being created, right? And I think that it does require a level of discipline. It requires a level of looking into the future and not sort of compromising on sometimes doing the things in an easy way, right? Because there are inherent philosophical ideas here that if they're not being preserved at the inception or at those phases of building the entire ecosystem, we clearly can end up in the old world, or something that looks much similar as the old world, right? And we interact with players, I would say, like with maybe like the broader spectrum, right, of the participants in this ecosystem. One day we can be morning in the meeting with some of the biggest incumbent banks in the world, right? And in the afternoon, we will meet with the most exciting, GameFi, NFT projects, artists that are working on the next project, right? And there is, when you do this in the same day or like in multiple consecutive meetings, you actually getting this sense of the dissonance, right? That sometimes exists in this industry, that you have people that truly grasp the future of this, right, and why this is potentially one of the most impactful, impactful trends on the future of the internet. And in some ways, I do think one of the most interesting social experiments, right, that are being conducted in the last couple of in the last I don't know, maybe like few decades. And on the other hand, you have essentially people that sort of looking at most of the current financial, basically like being able to capture the current financial opportunity, right, in this space that is predominantly speculative, right? And that essentially just leads you to taking or operating under ideas that are not really compatible with the future of this ecosystem.
So people have ideas that are not really compatible. Like what? Like what type of things are people trying to build, I guess, that we can't build?
One of the basic things to look at blockchain, right, is that this concept, that the essence of blockchain is a clearing system that allows you to transfer value without intermediaries, right? Which is something that is quite unique, because when you look at the way that value is being transferred in any other way,
Eloquent, yeah.
yeah, in the old world, right? Then you always need to have some, almost like a pyramid of intermediaries that their trust basically is anchored into one another, right? And then creates all the efficiency and also to a certain extent single points of failure, right? Now, you do see a lot of people basically coming in and say, okay, so what people are doing right now, they want to trade Bitcoin and all kind of altcoins, to sort of centralize it on a single venue, put everything in some kind of cold storage, and will operate a centralized exchange with under collateralized lending and so on. And that's probably very similar to the basically taking the concept of how the existing financial system works, right? From central depositories to central to the big custodian banks to the prime brokers and so on, and they will basically try to apply it to this ecosystem. Whereas I think that anyone who looks into how this actually is supposed to work, right, you understand that it actually, people should have sort of like their assets on chain. They should be able to interact with smart contracts, with DeFi protocols, and so on. And we need to figure out how to build, if we want to do some level of under collateralized lending, probably the future-proof version of that is to be able to deploy on-chain identity, right, and some kind of on-chain credit profiling and things like that, right? So you're sort of supposed to build towards that rather than try to take this beautiful technology and fold it into how the old world is doing things. And I think that people are starting to get it, right? So DeFi, especially like the client types that we're interacting with, I think that we're now starting to see them more and more excited about DeFi and the capabilities around smart contracts. They understand the value of tokenization. They understand the value of stable coins. They are starting to understand the value of non-fungible tokens. And and definitely things are moving into the right direction.
Who are your clients? Who come? Do you have startups come to you, and what type of things do you help them with?
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned, we're basically operating across the board, right? We're operating across the full spectrum of, I think 90% of our business is what we will define startup and small crypto native fintech companies, right? That they're coming to us to work with them on the project that is either pre-launch or post-launch. And a lot of time, by the way, those are actually the clients that we have the best partnership with, is that they were operating on some different platform from a custody, wallet management, settlement, so on. And then they're coming to us when they're basically hitting the wall in terms of their operations, right? And then they re-platform to Fireblocks to sort of unleash their growth. Those are, I would say, our most successful partnerships, but we definitely always excited to partner with people as early as possible. This is like 90% of our client base. The others are really, we do partner with a lot of the traditional financial institutions that right now I would say about 10-15% of our client base. And those are either traditional banks, asset managers, and so on. And the unique thing about them, I would say, and why, in my view, they are critical to the ecosystem, right? They are the bridge, right? Eventually, you do need to, for this ecosystem to really grow, you need to tokenize and bring the assets that they are currently custodying, right?
Yeah.
In the traditional space. So you need them to tokenize them and bring them to the blockchain. And in addition to that, I do think that in order to get to a mass consumer adoption or sort of break out or to cross the chasm, right?
Yeah.
To the early majority, they're sort of a very important participant because they do have the know-how in terms of how to service those clients. They do have the trust with those clients, and they can abstract a lot of the complexities to those clients.
Yeah, these are like originators or those who are like going to securitize an asset that's already off blockchain and put it onto a blockchain.
Yeah, exactly. But they also have a fairly big client base, right? That sometimes is unreachable if you're a small startup. We also need to keep in mind that usually to create a meaningful outcome, you need to bring a lot of parties together. For example, you need to bring the regulators, you need to bring the tax authorities, you need to bring a lot of the
Crazy.
people, a lot of people that are eventually important to create something that is stable and that has mass adoption. And for the smaller startup, it's a very significant uphill battle that I wouldn't recommend, right? I wouldn't recommend a small startup try to take on a battle and try to change the regulation. Whereas if you're a big incumbent, usually you already have that relationship.
You make me think about this problem that I've been trying to figure out over a long time when it comes to the future of like tokens, right? So you talk about like breaking in to new industries with big client bases and being able to do be like securitized assets or traditional type of streamlined data when it comes to maybe commodities markets or lending markets or gaming and really anything. But the problem is, from what I understand, you have the traditional like token world that allows everyone to own a token, right? Anyone from the lowest level of the low to the highest level of the high. And when you own a token, it's an equal playing field. You have an equal opportunity to be in the same room as everyone else and to earn the same amount of money to invest in the same right of things and to get potential profit potential. But the way our regulations are built now, and every single company runs into the same thing, that unless you're like gaming, right? And I mean, like, not like gambling, I mean, like, just like regular gaming. Unless you're gaming or it's like a meme coin, any type of hint of like profit expectation or security or securitizing an asset or anything, you're already going to run into like SEC or federal government related issues. And if you're a small startup, you can't do that. Or you have to go and what ends up happening is your lawyers are going to tell you, well, it's a walled garden. And there are these security token markets where you can prove you're a accredited investor. And they're changing the laws on who is even now an accredited investor. And it's a very small playing field now of people that can own these tokens. And then even when they can own these tokens, they can't even remove it because in the blockchain is built into the technology that you can't remove it from this walled garden, right? Or forbidden city type of thing. So if that's the case, then the ethos of decentralized finance is not decentralized, it's permissioned. It's inside of this place that only certain people can get into. What's the answer? I mean, how do we have a future here with that?
The question around how do you bring consumer protection into, let me just frame it in a slightly different way, right?
Yeah.
I think that the main question here and the reason why the lawyers and the regulators are all over this problem, right, is the question around consumer protection, right? And I think that just looking back 3 weeks 3 weeks back, right, at the whole Luna situation, we can appreciate why consumer protection is so important. There is one world in which a hedge fund will lose a significant amount of assets that I'll be honest, I think that usually happens day in and day out, and most people don't really care about it. And there is a world in which you have a lot of retail consumers that this was their only, this was basically their only income, or all of their savings, right? That all of it basically goes to zero, right?
Yeah, that's the biggest. That's what they're protecting against.
Yeah, and I think that most people, right, will agree that we need to have some protection against that happening, right? Because if there is anything that history tells us, right, is that in completely unregulated markets where consumer protection is non-existent, right, those things just keep happening for a variety of reasons, whether this is a deliberate fraud, whether this is just miscalculation, whether it's systemic risk, and so on, right? So I think that this is actually an important topic that, to be honest, if nothing else, I think that the regulators been very slow to react or provide any guidance for crypto, and therefore what they created is they didn't create any guidance in terms of how this is being done. Rather, they basically created a complete, regulatory uncertainty that effectively what it leads to is for sometimes, right, the less responsible players playing there rather than having the really responsible players, right? Because the responsible players want to see some level of certainty or some level of clarity. Now,
but like in the last 10 to 12 years or so in the industry, it seems like the ones that have gotten regulatory clarity are these just big companies, like the Coinbases and the Geminis of the world, and the small startups get regulated away. And I know it's great, and it's brought a lot of amazingness to our industry, but I'd love to see more lobbying for like an open way for DeFi to exist. And I don't know the answer.
Yeah. So maybe let me talk through. I think some solutions that I believe are reasonably successful, right? So I think that the regulator is supposed to do a couple of things, right? The first thing is that, which doesn't exist today, is to require disclosures, right? To require a project, instead of providing all kind of bold architecture, right, to also provide people the disclosures that around what it is, what is the risk, and why they should or shouldn't engage in this activity. And most times we just don't see that, right? The second thing that is really should be carefully considered is really how do we provision the access to it. And instead of, I believe that the future of it is, instead of providing this kind of walled or permissioned those segregated and permission walls, right, is actually through some level of programmable compliance, right? What does it mean? That the advantage of using on-chain identity, right, and the ability to build metadata into that identity, essentially, how much are you a high net worth individual according to US law or to European law, whatever you are, whatever you qualify to have access to certain products or not, that basically, that information can be codified into your wallets, right? And then we basically can have the DeFi protocols inquiry, the DeFi protocols or the assets themselves, right? Basically inquiry, what's your status, and are you allowed or not allowed to access that? And then we basically getting this kind of really transformative market with certain level of protections or certain level of access that are codified on chain. And maybe certain people will be allowed to have access to certain products that are extremely risky, right, and they don't carry any disclosures, and other people will be allowed to access things that like, I don't know, USDC, right? That it's very clear, you would use USDC or DAI, something that is collateralized or over collateralized, and you basically understand exactly what you're getting on the other end, right? So I think that this is the part of the beauty of this technology, that if it's done properly, you can actually use the same DeFi protocols, you can use the same DeFi machinery to interact between them, and I honestly think this is where things are heading. Another really important aspect here is actually that I think that the best way for the regulators to accommodate the point that you raised of like what's the main point is that for Coinbase or Gemini, they can spend, $1 million or $5 million, right, to get the right licenses to be regulated. For a small startup, this is a legal expenditure that unlikely they can spend, especially not when they raise their seed, right? And I think that for regulators to foster that innovation, one of the most useful tools is actually creating sandboxes, right, where people can come, they can innovate in production, right? They can basically give a certain, they can basically give exposure to individuals into what they're building, but there is a certain scale to which they can reach using the sandbox, right? So if it fails, it doesn't take $40 billion with it. It will take something that people will say, okay, this is an amount that we can either lose, we can insure, we are comfortable with this kind of failure rather than something that is really systemic.
Yeah, it's a good point, and it goes back to your disclosures idea too. But well, there's no but. Is there a way that I could only work with businesses and use products that use Fireblocks? Like, this would go towards self-regulation, because if you would offer a badge that on their website or your client list or something, not your client list, but there's a way, because then we'd start to become like a self-regulatory organization. Because
so we offer the badges.
You do?
We offer the badges. I don't think that too many of our clients are using badges, but yeah, that's something that we do encourage our clients to do. I also, by the way, think that we need to make sure that there are more than that the standard that Fireblocks sets is something that people can access regardless to Fireblocks or not, right? I think that a certain level of security and protection is important in this industry. I don't think that we want to, again, I think that we do want to create some level of decentralization, right? In terms of the security and the custody, but clearly to maintain a very high degree of fund protections, of operational protection for clients.
So is this something like if you had a client that wanted to send profit dividends to all token holders, is that something that you guys would help them do?
Yeah, so of course, this is one of the use cases. We do have DAOs and DeFi projects that they use us to manage their treasury. It's actually a pretty common.
And you build out the technology for it as well?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty simple use case for Fireblocks, where you would hold the treasury of the DAO, or you will hold the treasury of the DeFi project, and you will basically distribute it and control it through Fireblocks.
This is so cool, because there's a lot of different implementations of this that people can do, and you can help them build out their technologies. I was just on fireblocks.com. There's been a lot of hacks, especially the last 6 months. It's like you wake up in the morning and another one. Just yesterday, mirror protocol. There was we all knew the Terra Luna thing, but that wasn't really a hack, but that was something that fell apart. just on Sunday, actually, my friend called me up and he's like, Charlie, I have an emergency. The brother of my developer broke into our staking contract and stole all the money. It seems like this is happening all the time. How are you helping protect against this? And like, what hacks are we not seeing?
Yeah, so I think we're definitely seeing a shift. Yeah, a shift of the hackers from the layer that we invested heavily in securing, which is the base layer of the wallets and the transfers. That this is where Fireblocks known for. We also created a lot of a utility for securing interaction with DeFi protocols. There are still a lot of the practice of securing the DeFi protocols themselves, right? The smart contracts in terms of both pre-deployment audit, right? So as the developers develop smart contract, making sure that it doesn't contain vulnerabilities, and also real-time analysis, real-time defenses, real-time security, depending how you want to call it. This is an area that is currently in, I would say, active development. There are probably around 15 or 20 startups right now that are focusing on creating tools that analyze those protocols either before they are deployed or in real time after they are being deployed, and give you both as a protocol developer and or an investor, right, that deposits funds, or a user of the protocol, right, that deposits funds, they will give you they will give you basically a real-time information if you are exposed to certain risks, right? So it's an active development. I don't think those solutions are somewhat early, but it's definitely a problem that is being tackled as we speak.
Yeah, it's a lot of it comes down to either the projects themselves building out, like whether it's a smart contract that hasn't been audited or whatever, or there's someone who has insecure access to like key management. It's not multi-sig, and that's something that you guys help with. Something that you guys offer, so like it would prevent these things. But how do you? Okay, so then the second thing is you have these protocols that launch that on a blockchain level break. So
Right.
just so everyone understands, you have different types of like you have at a blockchain level, then you have like the actual business or the smart contract themselves, and then the biggest. And this is honestly like I don't know how you solve this, and this is something that if this can be solved, really will bring our industry forward. Is you have 30 plus good blockchain networks now. I would say, you have from Bitcoin to Ethereum to Solana, Stellar, Cardano. Then you have all the protocols that build on top of them. What's been breaking is these bridges, right? Like wormhole finance or whatever, to have one asset to go to the other. So my question is like, what's going to change? Is it going to be new blockchains will launch and then they'll have like the Cosmos, maybe like SDK in there? So what that is, for the listeners, it's the ability from on a blockchain level for it to connect with other blockchains. But what about blockchains that don't launch without that they have to rely on these bridges? Or will you have protocols that sit on top of that? Like, what's the future of this? We can't have 1,000 internets that launch, or to use a crude example.
I think that the multi-chain question is an interesting question that I'm not sure that I have.
Same. That's why I was asking you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have the answer of to how this thing is going to look in a couple of years from now. But I do think that there will be at least like a handful of winners, right? There are reasons why you need different blockchain approaches or concepts that are optimized for different things, and it's unclear that you can eventually bring all those use cases into one optimal solution, right? So that's one. That's probably one view on that. But right now, I mean, clearly we have a lot of runners in this race that are competing on who will be able to solve some of the most acute problems that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, of how to increase the the transaction throughput, how to increase the ability to build those smart contracts and so on. I think that will we still need bridges? Maybe, yes. I think that the practice around bridges, in the same way that we've seen around maybe wallets 5 years ago, 4 years ago, is still immature, right? So we still, because it's such an early engineering challenge, right? That we still didn't came with the perfect architecture that makes those bridges secure. And definitely from every unfortunate attack, like we've seen with Wormhole or we've seen with Ronin, so on, you basically learn what not to do at the expense of many times hundreds of millions of dollars that are being lost. So it's very fortunate. It's a very expensive lesson, but we definitely I think that engineering a secure bridge is definitely something that we'll probably see in, I don't know, next 12 or 18 months, a pretty good architecture of how to do that.
I'm working with a company that's trying to do that on top of Bitcoin. So I hope, the ability to like lock up assets and go like a secure bridge, that would be the key. It's really hard to do. It's really, really, really hard to do.
Yeah, it's really hard to do because you essentially have a single pile of those assets sitting exposed over there in some specific address, and usually the logic to control those bridges is somewhat complicated, right? So given the fact that we haven't figured out exactly what is the optimal architecture for it yet, that those bridges became a honeypot for attackers.
What originally excited you to get into this industry full time? And like, how do you convince people to come over and work for you? Because I just saw the news you guys brought on someone from the Bank of England who worked on fintech there. How do you and to work on some of your central bank digital currency infrastructure? I mean, how do you get people excited to come over?
Yeah, Varun joined us from Bank of England. So I think it actually goes back to what excited us to start the Fireblocks. The idea of the basic idea that this is going to transform financial services, and this is going to be one of the most important ecosystems, right, that are being built and developed to replace the way that money value moves.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And that's I think anyone will agree that if this is going to happen, it's a huge and a very exciting opportunity for a lot of people. And also Fireblocks being sort of at the forefront of some of the technical breakthroughs and developments that also excite people, right? So really our mission to create a platform that allows any business to securely and efficiently engage and build in a scalable way in this space, I think excites a lot of people. And I think that our track record of delivering of that is also attracting the best people to come and join us. So my personal experience is that as long as people sort of buy into the future of crypto and Web3, they would usually find that Fireblocks is one of the most exciting places to work to promote that cause, right? Because the question that the question if this has to be done in a secure way, the question if this should somehow merge with being very usable and efficient, it's pretty trivial that the answer for both of them are yes. And it basically comes full circle to where we started at the podcast.
When do you want potential projects or entrepreneurs to come to you? Like, so you have those who have designed what they want to do. Maybe they've created like a funds flow document or something, or they've drawn it out. Should they go out and try to build something, a minimum viable, project, and then product and then come to you? Do you want to hear from people when they just have the idea and they need help building it? When do you get, who's your perfect client?
Yeah, so I would say the following. Right now, we usually would like to have teams that they have some minimal funding, right? So they are basically in the seed phase and they are building their MVP. I think that this is the point, the optimal point in time to come and engage us. As we basically building towards something that will be way more self-service, right? That we will be able to hopefully engage with people even earlier in the process when they're doing their ideation or they're developing. But fortunately, right now, and I would say that we do need people that already sort of organize into this kind of seed formation to come and work with us.
Amazing. Amazing. Michael Shaulov, thank you so much, Fireblocks. I really appreciate taking the time and coming on Untold Stories, and giving us a lot of this insight into what people are heads down and building right now.
Thanks so much, Charlie. Thanks for inviting me.